Alright, after the feedback on the first section of the video was out, I thought I would just do a quick close-up of some of the things that my fingers got in the way of. And at the back here, behind these springs, are two small rushes. And when I took these screws off here at the back, here and here, these small parts here were the ones that I said be careful that you don't lose them. In this particular engine, there's a copper part here that's a spring. This is a little different than a couple of the other ones I have, but nonetheless, you want to be careful because when you remove these, they tend to get lost. So, and I will go over that further on the engine, but then the back side here is the armature, and so it's part of the commutator, and this is copper, and that's what I cleaned with the different Dremel attachments. I put lubrication on the end here before I put this back plate on with my lightweight grease. I also put lubrication here, and then in this part, the shaft of the bearing, I should say, it goes through this plate here. Before I assembled it, I put some grease inside here on the shaft. And on these moving parts, again, you want to put a little bit of oil here because this is moving obviously back and forth. All right, hopefully that clears up some of the places where my fingers got in the way. And we'll proceed. Now, if we take a look at this wiring, you can see that somebody has spliced some of the original wiring here, which that's neither here nor there, although this should be covered. And then down here is a piece of shrink tubing that I think just didn't get shrunk enough or was too big to begin with, and that probably, yeah, that's probably what was over here. But then here's another piece of shrink tubing, and it's also loose. And when I pulled it off, I found this. So this is all a section of wire that I think I'm going to replace, and then I'm going to hopefully be able to reattach this pin. Someone at some point did put a nice crimp in it. So we shall see how successful or unsuccessful I am. I may have to actually drill it out. Then this is the other power wire, and as you can see, it's got a section of bare wire. So I think in the case of this one, because the wire seems to be in pretty good shape, what I'm going to do is actually use, first of all, some of that liquid tape that I got, and I'm going to coat that, and then I'm going to put some shrink tubing to bridge this gap from here to here and go ahead and leave as is. Since, well, I'm not doing a restoration to mint condition, I'm doing a restoration to functionality. So that's some of the difference here. Alright, so a couple things that I wanted to mention real quickly. The tip, that white tip connected to something blue that you saw, is a solder remover, and I no longer know where in the world I got this thing. But basically, you press a spring down, it loads a plunger, and then you press a button and it sucks solder up. So whenever I'm dealing with a large lump like that, I can remove it without burning myself. So here I'm taking the pin, and I decided instead of drilling it out that I would actually try to split it open and clean out the inside, because as I looked at it, there was actually some old wire insulation and wire there. Then once it was cleaned up, try to heat it up, do a little bit of soldering to get it ready for prepped to receive the wire, and then go from there. Now here you see I've used one of these helping hands with the alligator clips because I just didn't have enough hands, and I've got it on top of a 75 watt iron, and I used the larger iron because again the alligator clip is basically a heat sink, so it's removing the heat. And be grateful this is sped up. I tell you, this is the kind of thing that makes a person want to, I don't know, go stare at paint drying. It'd be a lot more fun. Anyhow, it took forever. Once the wire was attached, I crimped it back up while things were still soft, because I didn't want the shape to be flattened out and not fit into the jack port on the back of the engine. And now here I am attaching the new wire and the two existing wires. It's always challenging if you're starting to try to solder existing wires, or I should say wires that have solder on them, together. And this proved to be just a lot of monkey business. It took me 3 times of putting things together to get them to stay. And in the course of that, one of the wires broke. The one wire, of course, it was barely long enough to begin with, so I wasn't sure if I was going to have to replace the second wire. Oh, the joys, you know, that's just how it goes. But I went ahead and put everything back together and attached it to the top of the smoke generator. And it did look like the wire was concerned about that orange one was going to be long enough. So wipe the brow there. Here I am moving on to coating that exposed wire. Again, that's a little bit overkill because I am covering it with shrink wrap tubing, but why not? One of the reasons I wanted to use the shrink wrap tubing is because it was going to add some strength between the plug and the insulation on the wire, so that when you pull those plugs out, there's more than just the insulation. So anyhow, thanks again for tuning in, and we'll get another release out here shortly, and I hope you have time to enjoy your flyer.